Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about when open source isn't good enough. Ajay is going to do a great presentation. It's something we hear a lot in the field. But before we jump in, we're going to do some quick introductions on our side. My name is Kevin. I am on the go-to-market team here at Unstructured. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. I am joined by my better halves in Daniel, who is a principal solutions architect, and Ajay, who is on our DevRel team. Some quick housekeeping items. Make sure that chat goes in the chat box, and if you have specific questions, there is a separate tab for Q&A, and we will get to those questions at the end. We will be sending a recording of this webinar after the conversation today, and we'll also have some resources to play around with Unstructured. And if you have any questions or you want to talk to an AI expert, go to our website, book a call. We are always happy to connect and talk all things AI. All right, a little bit of background onto Unstructured. We started 3 years ago as an open source library looking to answer the question, do companies struggle to take unstructured data and to convert that into a structured JSON output? And you flash forward to today, and it's been a really incredible ride. We have a ton of amazing customers, 40 million product downloads, and some incredible partners in the field who are helping us solve this problem at scale. And without further
Yes.
ado,
Let's,
Ajay,
I will take it up. Thank you, Kevin. So let's dive into today's agenda and just see what we are going to cover together. First, yep, one second. My demo gods are trying to punish me today, which is cool, but we're good. First, we'll walk through specific signals that indicate whether you might have outgrown your current setup. These aren't always obvious, and it's really easy to stick with something that's good enough longer than you should. Secondly, I'll give you exact questions you could ask yourself before deciding whether you want to build over an open source solution or buy. And finally, I'll show you what is like something that's actually possible. We'll just do a live demo of the unstructured platform so you could see exactly how we handle the complexity that we're going to be discussing. So let me tell you a quick story about something that we see all the time, and I'm sure all of us have done this before. You find an open source library, maybe you just started using unstructured itself. You wrote some cool downstream code, you uploaded some PDFs, and everything worked really well. Like your extraction was perfect, your vector embeddings look good, and suddenly now you had a whole document processing system. So naturally, you're now excited and you're just going to go show it to your team. Your manager loves your demo. Your team is extremely excited. And everyone's thinking, yo, we've cracked this problem. Our clients are going to love it. Like, we're so excited for it. But here's what we've learned from watching teams move from prototype to production. You'd often run into problems that you never knew existed. The perfect demo you just did is about to meet real world messy data because suddenly you're not just dealing with like thousands of documents anymore. You're dealing with like 10,000s or hundreds of thousands of documents. And you're not just dealing with clean PDFs, you're dealing with scanned forms, you're dealing with weird layouts, and randomly you've got PowerPoints, and these PowerPoints have these weird these PowerPoints have these weird images and tables. So your basic text extraction that you just started off with is just not enough when you're dealing with all of these file types and data. And it's not just about document complexity either. Your clients might now want integrations with SharePoint, and then someone else might come in that might want Databricks integrations, and then Confluence. And then you're also constantly trying to evaluate new vision language models as they drop. So you could like make sure your core algorithm is still state of the art. And then there's also security. Like you might get a new client that might want everything to run on their own environment, and you need to figure that out as well. And now suddenly your entire document processing module just became extremely complicated. So a quick show of hands. So what's probably, like, have you ever faced this before where you had to move something from a POC to production and all sorts of hell broke loose? In my case, it happened when I was working with a client, and it is initially just like simple CSV files, but later when we went to production, they started uploading like these complex table, like these files with like multiple sheets. They had like complex tables, and there's all these merged cells. There are also like formulas, and some cells just had so much content that it just broke my code altogether. It's yeah, it's yeah, I don't want to go through it, but I have. So there's multiple ways you could think about tackling this. So maybe you just started solving these problems one by one. You're planning out infrastructure, you're planning out proposing new connectors, you're planning out new model integrations, and all of a sudden you realize that you now need like more specialized infrastructure engineers. You need more connectors because every client you meet has like a different data source. You need more model integrations because you're trying to hit state of the art performance, and all of these are just not easy to build solutions, and these can often take a lot of time and testing, and this usually ends up resulting in what we call a rat's nest of custom code to prepare the data for your actual production use case. This happens because data doesn't come in a neat packaged data set from a single place, unfortunately. In the real world, like your data is just spread across multiple sources. Maybe you have some in an S3 bucket, maybe in Confluence, maybe in Google Drive, maybe in Dropbox. And the data itself can come in all sorts of formats. You would have just started with PDFs, but then now you're dealing with like emails, you're asked to deal with spreadsheets, and each of these can just require different types of approaches to extract, like add more metadata. And this is just on the parser's end itself. And then you also have to consider how you're going to be dealing with chunking those documents, how you're going to be enriching them with more metadata, what sort of embedding models are you planning on using, and where are you even going to store all your results. So what you started as a simple document processing project just became like on top of an open source product, just became a whole complex data engineering system with like these dozens of moving parts. We feel this can be avoided, and that's exactly why we ended up building the unstructured platform. We solve this ratness problem by connecting to your sources, getting your data, and giving you a whole workflow to pre-process all of that data. So now, regardless of the source, the file type, we have all these different partitioning strategies. We have other steps like enrichments to make your data even more usable. We've got chunking, we've got embedding. So with all of these, we just push it straight into your destination. So now there's no need for you to write custom API code anymore. Everything is all bundled into one single product, and the results are just delivered right into either your vector store, your graph database, or just any of your downstream applications itself. Open source is great. Like it's been this foundation for so many of our successful projects. And honestly, all of us would have started our document processing journey through an open source project itself to begin with. Like it gave you flexibility, it gave you the ability to get started quickly. But as your needs started evolving, your requirements also became more specific to your business. Like you might find yourself at a point where what got you here isn't necessarily what's going to be enough, and I want to like stress on that exactly during this webinar. Like this webinar is exactly about finding out what's right for you at this stage of your journey. Some teams will stick with open source, and that's perfectly fine. Others will find a managed platform that better serves their needs. So think of this webinar maybe like a choose your own adventure type moment. You're at this decision point where you can honestly assess where you are right now and where you're headed. Neither choice is wrong, but they lead to very different paths. So let's walk through some key questions so you can figure out which path makes more sense for your use case. So let's start with a very simple question. What kind of scale are we talking about here? Are you maybe dealing with thousands of documents, or like, yeah, a couple of thousands of documents per day? Or are you looking at maybe hundreds of thousands of documents daily from multiple data sources? This distinction is huge because this is the difference between, yeah, my project might just stay, or my platform might just stay small forever, versus I need all of my resources scaling up to handle everything. And this changes everything about your architecture decisions. If you're in the first camp, your current setup might serve you perfectly. But if you're in the second, you're going to hit a lot of walls really quickly. And here's maybe another question worth thinking about. What did your team actually work on the last month? Did you spend your time optimizing document extraction, or did you spend your time, most of your time, building better chunking strategies or improving your processing speed? Or were you trying to like debug why certain file types weren't getting parsed correctly? Like this work is all valuable, but there's also an opportunity cost that you should be thinking about. Every sprint cycle you spend perfecting your parser and its infra is a cycle that you're not spending on the features that will actually differentiate you from your competitors itself. Like document processing was supposed to be just a module in your product, but sometimes it gets really easy for it to silently take up the main stage. And here's another scenario. Right now you're getting a lot of interest from larger enterprise customers. All of them are like, it shows that your product is growing and a lot of people like it, and like people are willing to bet on you for the longer run. But then they also start including compliance requirements. And building all of this compliant infrastructure from scratch is also not a 2 week sprint. It's months of specialized work. It involves a lot of specialized people, and it's also work that will take your team further away from your core product development. The question here becomes, is this really where you want to focus your engineering expertise, or would you feel better if you could just inherit it somehow? And finally, let's just talk about the core algorithm itself. Advanced capabilities are becoming more advanced every month, and there's if you just scroll through X or anything, there's new vision language models that are being dropped constantly, and all of them show that they're all state of the art. But do they hit maximum performance on your documents right off the bat? I don't think so. Like you need like to evaluate them itself, you need a lot of accurate metrics. You need to set up evaluation pipelines, and you also need to like curate data sets. You need to label them, and to top all of that up, you're also doing a lot of page cost optimizations because passing data through these models also can rack up your builds pretty fast at scale. So what you started as a let's just try extracting some text just became very serious R&D efforts in document processing. It's really exciting, yes, but is this the R&D efforts your business needs to be doing right now? So this whole like all of this is not really about what's right or wrong. If you're recognizing some of these signals, let's just talk about how to think through this decision itself. Like both open source and platforms have their place, but the key here is that you need to ask yourself honest questions about where you are right now and where you are headed. So here's a practical way that we've written about to help you think through that decision. Rather than just asking if we should build or buy, you could evaluate where you actually are across all of these different dimensions. The key insight here is that all of this isn't binary. Like you might find yourself in the left column for some criteria and in the right column for others. Like maybe you're still in the proof of concept stage and you're dealing with very complex documents, or maybe your documents are pretty simple, but you need to like deal with a massive scale itself. So the question here isn't whether you check every box on one side. It's all about understanding where your complexity is coming from and whether that's where you want to invest your engineering efforts. If most of your challenges are on the right side, I would say a platform is worth considering. So let's just take a minute and just think about where your current setup falls in each of these dimensions. And now, for those of you who found yourself leaning more towards the right side of the table, or maybe the red pill itself, whether it's on the scaling challenges or the complex documents, the compliance requirements, or just the fact that you could have just been spending more time on document processing infra than your actual product, I can show you what an actual platform approach might look like in practice. So let me just take just data sources itself. In all of these cases, unstructured data is stored in a lot of different sources, and different clients might want them to be pushed into a bunch of different destinations. If you are investing in a paid platform, these are like like if you are like these are all the sources you do not have to build by yourself. And then these are also all the destinations you do not have to build by yourself. And there's also so much nuances that come into play over here. For example, there's a lot of maintenance needed. Like the code can fail because the vendor decided to change something on their end, or maybe there's versioning on your end. There's a lot of tests that run constantly, making sure that everything is up, everything is running and proper. And then let's just go into just setting up a workflow itself, just setting up document pre-processing workflow itself. So yeah, I'm deciding to build it myself here. And this is just on the options for a parser itself. Do you wanna do you have very simple documents that you could just run it through like a simple technique? Or are your documents having like a lot of tables, like simpler tables and embedded images? Or are you dealing with a lot of like complex documents with a lot of nuance around scanned images, handwritten content, like very weird tables. And there's also all of these models that keep getting added as as like they come out, and none of this requires any efforts from your end. You're just signing up and you see all of this right into your monitor. And then comes just even if you just parse all of your data, you can also add extra metadata. So maybe you're thinking about adding more, making your images more useful for your downstream applications, or maybe making your tables more useful downstream, or even like text itself. Like you could use all three, but I'm just going to keep one right now for simplicity. And then there's the whole, yeah, like you've enriched your data. Now you need to chunk it so they're all in the right sizes to go into your destination, so you could use it even better. And then there's just embeddings itself. There's a lot of embedding models that can come into play, and there's also you need to there are teams that would just watch the market, try to understand what embedding models developers as a whole are preferring. And there's also a lot of nuances that come into play when you're trying to include them. For example, what happens if you quickly hit a rate limit when you're trying to bombard these embedding models with a lot of chunks? Or yeah, and then what happens, just there's also a lot of mismatches, there's like availability, there's like so much nuances that come into play that you would have to build by yourself, which you could pretty much skip if you're just investing into a platform. And this is personally my favorite feature. This is, say you have maybe you have maybe a few if you say, for example, you have 10,000 documents and you just want to test out how one of them might look like through the pipeline instead of running everything out. You could, one second, let me just set a task. Yep, 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 yep. Okay, okay, okay. I can just test this out, and you could see how, like, I'm just gonna cut some time because this may take 2 minutes, but you could see how the results would look like itself before you decide to run everything on your entire data. And what I found really cool is that the like I used to VLM, like the models here was also able to understand the colors itself and print out or like add the colors here, parse it correctly, and add it to your text itself. I found that pretty cool. And then there's also per stage outputs, which are just, yeah, which I find pretty intuitive to understand and see, think about how my documents would look like at every step before they go in. So for the, yeah, so if you found the demo pretty long and if you just prefer short form content, really, here's like a quick summary slide of what you could inherit from the platform instead of you having to build it yourself. There's like cool connectors that go from anywhere to everywhere and that are constantly getting updated. There's a VLM partitioner that's like constantly being tuned. And there's also all the other partitioning techniques that are constantly being improved. There's like embedders, there's like many chunking strategies. You're inheriting compliance, and you're inheriting a team that's pretty much working behind the scenes, making sure that everything's running always. So, yeah, that's how the platform handles the complexity we talked about earlier without you having to build and maintain the infrastructure by yourself. The key takeaway here is that this decision isn't permanent. Like you could start with an open source, graduate to a platform at scale. We've seen many teams actually use both. Like they've used open source based solution for a simple workflow and a managed platform for more production workloads. But the important thing here is that you need to be honest about where you are right now and where you are headed. Now, I'm just going to open this up for questions. My team is here. If you'd like to your help, like if you'd like any answers on anything, and if you want to continue this conversation later, just feel free to reach out to us directly. We could help talk through your use cases and everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ajay. Great presentation. So yeah, like Ajay said, feel free to submit questions in the Q&A tab. We do have some pre-submitted questions that we can roll into. All right. So first question is from Manuel. Curious about options for running unstructured workloads with EU compliant environments, PDFs with PII. So we have three different deployment types for handling sensitive data. You have the open source product, which we touched on. We also have a dedicated instance that we can deploy into a EU data center, and we can secure that with a private link. And then for incredibly sensitive and restrictive environments, we support full NVPC deployments. And there are trade-offs with all three of those options, which we touched on today. The second part of this question, and Daniel, I might need your help here. Current unstructured features on redacting or masking, managing PII on PDFs with other file types and classifying the document. Um, Thoughts on that, Daniel?
Yeah, so this actually falls into the category of like a lot of basically enrichments that might actually want to be done on your unstructured data. The PII redaction one we've heard a lot. We actually have some modules that we've already built to solve for this, but generally speaking, we have basically a pluggable architecture for our platform. So any sort of like custom development that needs to happen to fit your use case can actually be attained, but that's typically just reserved for NVPC customers or virtual private instance customers.
Awesome. This is a question we get quite often. We've seen open source tools work fine at small scale, but fall over when documents get more complex or volumes increase. How does unstructured handle performance at enterprise scale?
Yes, so we have basically like across different parts of the stack, different levels of concurrency and different sort of strategies for concurrency. So we have, of course, the platform is built on Kubernetes, which is allows for essentially infinite horizontal scaling. And then actually within a given document, some documents we've seen are, in the thousands of pages long. So if you were to process those pages sequentially, of course, that's also a bottleneck. So we have smart page splitting. And of course, we have automated strategies for routing between all of our different transform strategies. So you're not just throwing everything at like a VLM for transformation. We also have intelligent rules-based routers as well, rules-based transformation engines. So we look at the document on a per page level and make that decision. So a lot of different strategies sort of come together to make it performant at scale.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. What are some common symptoms that open source isn't working for your AI pipelines? I can handle this. A common story we hear is a company will start out with a tiger team of like 3 to 5 engineers on a small set of data, and everything's going great. Everyone's high-fiving, and then you start to roll it out to different business units. The scope of the project increases, and the complexity of the documents increases. The volume of documents gets bigger. And a team that started of like 2 to 5 people is now like 20 engineers trying to maintain this rat's nest graphic that Ajay showed in the deck. And that's typically when we get brought into the conversation where teams say, hey, how do we fix this? How can we make this easier? And how can we get our engineers back to focusing on our core product? Um, Daniel, any other thoughts or Ajay on that question?
I think you covered it well.
Okay.
Yeah, you.
Awesome. One more question. Security is a big concern for us, especially with sensitive data in finance and healthcare. What does unstructured do differently than other libraries and data processing providers to ensure compliance and data protection?
Yeah, so Kevin touched on it a little bit earlier, but we do offer dedicated instances. So basically, our SaaS offering is multi-tenant. So if you want to go beyond that and to actually having your data isolated, that would be the first step. Or if it's even more regulated than that, you need to go full in VPC. We can support that as well. We are GDPR compliant. We also have a SOC 2 Type 2. So I wouldn't say we're necessarily doing anything different, but we are doing everything sort of by the books at Unstructured with our platform.
Awesome. Cool. We are right up on time. I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined. We have another webinar next week on structured data extraction that we're really excited about. Thank you so much for being here, and we cannot wait to
Thank
see
you.
you next week.